Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man? They say murder three. Strange things that happen here. How stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree?
Welcome to Strange Things, broadcasting from the Raimundo Rios Mayo Library in Arkansas. And welcome to the show. My name is Chris James. I am your host. Tonight we will be talking about John Titor. This is season number 1, episode number 30. Before we get going, if you tuned in last Saturday hoping to hear Ken Gerhardt, there were some insurmountable technical problems that pretty much canceled the whole thing. I am working to get Ken back on just as soon as I can. And don't you know, it was probably the best interview I ever performed, and I have nothing to show for it other than being able to talk to a good friend of mine for an hour. Sorry about that. Hopefully we have found the problems and gotten rid of them. Tonight's show was suggested by Arturo Castro. He's fascinated by some of the more incredible aspects of John Titor, and so here we go. There is some debate as to exact date that he started, but sometime in November 2000, a person calling themselves Time Travel Zero began saying he was a time traveler from the year 2036. After a few posts, the time traveler began using the name John Titor. He said he was with the military and he was on a mission. He started out posting pictures of his time machine along with the operating manual. With the passage of time, people began to question him about why he was here. They also asked questions about the physics of time travel and what he thought of our time as it compared with his. John Titor posted on other forums, including artbell.com, which has unfortunately gone away. In his posts, John Titor entertained, he angered, he frightened, and sometimes even belittled those who engaged him in conversation. John Titor had claimed he was an American soldier from 2036 who was based in Tampa, Florida, assigned to the government time travel project. Titor was supposed to have been sent back to 1975 to retrieve an IBM 5100 computer, which he said was needed to debug various legacy computer programs in the year 2036. The IBM M5100 had a floppy disk drive, something kids today will never see, and the screen was about the size of a smartphone. You would want a book or a magazine handy to read while you waited for the computer to do its thing. They were slow. There were no images on the screen, just words. Most people don't know, but all of the scientific experiments conducted during the Gemini and the Apollo missions is unattainable right now because the magnetic tape used to record the data can't be accessed with modern computers. And no one thought to hang on to any of the old reel-to-reel computers. If you ever watch those old sci-fi movies where they have a bank of machines as big as a wall, all lined up with what looks like movie reels mounted on the front, well, those were what computers looked like back in the 50s and 60s. And then there were the punch cards. Nothing happened until you loaded in the punch cards. Now, Titor had been selected for this mission specifically because his paternal grandfather was directly involved with the assembly and the programming of the 5100. And Titor said he was just kind of passing by in the year 2000 and he wanted to stop off and reclaim some items for his family that they had lost in a war that was to come. He also wanted to visit his family who lived in Florida at the time. I can kind of understand this, but why did he decide to go online and tell the world he was here? Was there some underlying reason, or was he just the kind of guy that liked to run his mouth? Now, my first experience with Art Bell was while working midnights. In Laredo, we had 3 radio stations. 2 played teen rock, something I could live without. And then we had an AM station that had been playing country music, but at some point in time they switched to talk radio. Art Bell would come on at midnight, and he would run until 5 in the morning. What caught me off guard was that at 4 in the morning, the show would start over, playing the first hour again. The first night I had stepped out of my vehicle sometime around 3:30 or so, and I didn't get back to the vehicle until about 4:10. It took me forever before I managed to catch on to this scheduling. See, originally Coast to Coast had been a 5-hour show, but Mr. Bell had decided that 5 hours was just too taxing, so he had cut it down to 4. The men doing the scheduling found they had an hour to fill, so they just started the show over and played the first hour over. The first show I caught was Art Bell speaking with Mel Waters in 1997. As Titor made his fantastic predictions, the world became enthralled by the possibility he actually was from the future. The more time he spent online, the more people became aware of him. And soon John Titor was well known throughout the world. Anyone who listened to Coast AM would have listened whether you believed the man or not. As Art Bell said back in April of 2000, if time travel is possible, then where are all the time travelers? They should be here by now. The show was on time travel, and people were asked to call in only if they were time travelers or dimensional travelers. During the show, Art learned that in another dimension, he was a senator from Arizona. This was a bit of a thrill for Mr. Bell, knowing that one of his other selves were high up in the management field. Then the point was raised, is there any difference between time travel and dimensional travel, considering time is considered to be the 4th dimension, and the two are very much interchangeable? Now, theoretical physicists mostly agree that time travel is possible. It's the power source that is the problem. March 21st, 2001, John Titor told the world he would be leaving our time and returning to 2036. After that, he was never heard from again. And speculation and investigation about who John Titor was and why he was online continues to this day. It's as if he stepped off the edge of the world, or more likely he traveled somewhere in time. You can go to johntitor.com if you're interested and have a look at some of his posts. There are those who will simply consign the whole story to science fiction, brush the dust from their hands, and go on with their lives, happy but ignorant. This is by far the easiest route to take. Then there are those who look at the evidence and wonder, what if? What if this guy John was actually from the future? John did make some predictions. Some came true, but others fell far from what we know today. Now, how could this be? If he really was from the future, how could he not know what was coming for us? Big things that any school kid would have learned growing up in the year 2020. And we're going to take a break here, play a couple of commercials. Don't go away. We'll be right back after these important messages. You're listening to Arkanasa Radio. Do you have skin? Would you like to take better care of it? Call Lourdes James, independent beauty consultant, and set up an appointment. Call 723-3019. If your vision isn't what it used to be, and you're not sure you're seeing Bigfoot or just your neighbor mowing his lawn, stop on by Del Norte Optical, 107 Calle del Norte, just across the street from the Embassy Suites. You should be able to see what you're looking at. Looking for a great cup of coffee? Swing on by the Organic Man Coffee Truck, 1002 Iturbide, suite number 7. Not a coffee drinker? They have hot chocolate, hot tea, and sometimes muffins and cookies. It's a great place to meet your friends for a conversation or curl up in the corner with a good book. The Organic Man Coffee Truck. Life is too short to drink bad coffee.
No, don't say goodbye. Stay with us. This is Arkanasa Radio. Quédate con nosotros. Estás escuchando Arkanasa Radio.
You're listening to Strange Things with Chris James. And welcome back to the show. We are talking about John Titor, the time traveler. Just a quick note here. For those of you who haven't noticed, Christmas is coming. There's always a few people you just don't know what to get them. Well, how about a book or two? Check out some of my writings at Amazon.com. Such classics as Flying Saucers Attack Walmart or This Sucks. I have humor and horror, so check it out. Just look for Chris James, This Sucks, to find a link to all of my books. There is some theory that explains some of the... correction. There are those who simply consign the whole story to science fiction. There are some theories that explain some of these difficulties. One says, if you go back in time and fiddle about with what should happen, let's say you somehow convince John Kennedy to stay home in October 1963. You get him to miss his trip to Dallas. Thus, he never stops those bullets. One theory says by not getting killed in Dallas, somehow, some way, he'd wind up dying in Washington, D.C. instead. It's almost as if history, no matter what we do, will come out the same every time. Then there are those who believe if you successfully were to save John Kennedy's life, the timeline from November 22nd, 1963 would run parallel to our timeline, but it would be a totally different line, a different dimension, if you will. This would make time travel more like dimensional travel. You're not moving in time, but across dimensional lines. Mr. Titor, if nothing else, should have said something about 9/11. Or was this revelation so bad, so earth-shattering, he simply chose to not tell us, for fear the information would have altered the world so much it would have had enormous effects on his future. For example, let's say you build a time machine. You go back to Austria in 1900. You track down a young boy. He's 11 years old. He's out playing in his backyard, and you kill him. Adolf Hitler would never have come to power. The Holocaust would never have been. Or would it? Hitler was just one man. There could have been others waiting in the wings of time to be pushed forward onto the stage of life to fulfill what would amount to the world's destiny. If Adolf Hitler had been shot during World War I, would Heinrich Himmler have been chosen to bring the Nazi Party to power? Would World War II have come about no matter who was calling the shots? As horrific as it was, had the Holocaust never taken place, would the country of Israel ever have come into being? Or was that also one occurrence in the world's destiny that was going to happen no matter what? There's a website still out there. It's called johntitor.com if you'd like to read some more about his predictions and statements. John tried to answer every question that was sent to him over the 4-month period he was online. Because people found it kind of neat that he would answer any questions you sent him, many people didn't bother to read any of the previous posts and simply went ahead and asked questions that had already been asked. It may offer a glimpse of what a time traveler goes through when having the same conversation over and over. He developed quite a following. Titor did make numerous predictions about future events, the future to 2001. Now, some were a bit vague and some were very specific. In regards to events in 2004, he described a drastically changed future in which the United States had broken up into 5 smaller regions. The environment and the infrastructure had been devastated by a nuclear attack, and most of the other world powers had been destroyed. Well, that didn't happen in our timeline, but we don't know what his timeline might look like. Just maybe by his telling us about the upcoming disasters that would befall the United States, did he change what was to be? With all the people listening to him and reading his predictions, did they change their direction enough to change our future? The case also incited a lot of skepticism. There were flaws that people caught. Some of the specific events he predicted actually occurred, but others didn't. This led to a general conclusion that his story was an elaborate hoax. If you studied time travel, you should have read about how it is impossible to go back in time and accidentally kill your grandfather and therefore change the fact that you were ever born, and therefore you couldn't have gone back and killed anyone. How on earth could you accidentally kill your grandfather? And why would you? Are you still mad that he didn't leave you that inheritance you thought you deserved? And really, do you want to break your grandmother's heart? If you were to meet yourself from the future, would you recognize yourself? Just think about it a second. You're doing whatever you're doing at the time, and a stranger comes up to you. He or she is considerably older than you are, but looks distinctly familiar. They look kind of like your grandfather or grandmother. The person begins to tell you things that only you should know. This would be their way of showing you they know you as well as you do. Then the big revelation is dropped on you. This is you from the future, here to pass on some vital information or maybe just say hello. From this moment on, your life is going to be different. You're going to act differently because you now know something about what the future holds, at least as far as you're concerned. This will also change the person who just came back from the future, because suddenly they'll have a memory of having met themselves. Also, you will change the coming timeline by doing whatever the future you told you. This change should send you down a different timeline than the one your future self came from. If that's not confusing, I don't know what is. 2 Russian mathematicians have suggested that the giant particle accelerator that was built in Europe, the Center for Nuclear Research, we know it as CERN in Geneva, could create a condition where it is possible to travel backwards or forwards in time. In essence, Irina Afeva and Igor Valovich believed that the Large Hadron Collider at CERN, which is now up and running, might create tiny wormholes in space which could allow some form of time travel. So it looks as if there just might be the first steps towards someone like John Titor coming back to visit us. In the 60s, only giant companies or universities could afford a computer. They cost way too much money. Today, just about every school kid has a laptop computer as well as a smartphone. The cost has diminished enough so everyone can afford them. And size? Look at your cell phone and realize it has more capabilities than a building-sized computer from the 60s. Could this hold true with time travel technology as well? Will someday in the future time travel machines be offered late at night on TV? Buy a second one and only pay shipping and handling? Or you go to Walmart and there's a big sign, as seen on TV? Now, time travel into the future is absolutely possible. In fact, time passes at a different rate in orbit than it does on the ground. And this has to be taken into consideration in order for satellite navigation systems to work. Now, time travel into the past, although technically allowed in Einstein's theory, in the opinion of a few physicists, it's undoable. But then some physicists had also said that space travel was impossible as well. We just need to develop a better understanding of the fundamental laws of physics. There's also the problem of how to generate the energy needed to move forward and backwards in time. Albert Einstein is said to have taken part in a time travel experiment. The Philadelphia experiment was a military endeavor that was carried out by the U.S. Navy in the Philadelphia Naval Shipyards in Pennsylvania on October 28, 1943. The U.S. Navy destroyer escort, USS Eldridge, was transported from Philadelphia to Norfolk, Virginia, 270 miles away, in just minutes. The next time the power was turned on, the Eldridge vanished and managed to deposit one of its crew members, Al Bielek, at Montauk, New York in the year 1983. And for more on this time travel story, check out season number 1, episode 24, The Montauk Mystery, which can be found in the archives at strangethings.podomatic.com. Some folks began to believe there was some coded message hidden in the posts being placed on the internet. People would try various methods of deciphering these cryptic utterances, but not to any great extent. Some, just about any time there are quantities of information available, someone will try to read into the text. This is not saying there might not be something there. It's just so far no one has found any hidden messages yet. Titor also said he was trying to alert anyone that would listen about the threat of Crutchfield-Jacob disease spreading through the beef products, which is also known as mad cow disease, or spongiform encephalitis. When questioned about them by an online subscriber, Titor also expressed an interest in the mysteries such as UFOs, which remained unexplained in his time. Titor suggested that UFOs and extraterrestrials might be travelers from a much further time in the future than his own, with superior time machines. He also said he wanted to divert a coming civil war in the United States. Titor claimed that the Everett Wheeler model of quantum physics, better known as the many worlds interpretation, was correct. The model says that every possible outcome of a quantum decision occurs in a separate universe. Titor stated that this was the reason the grandfather paradox would not happen. Following the logic of the argument, Titor would be killing a different John Titor's grandfather in a timeline other than his own, if he was the kind of person to go back and kill his own grandfather. John said, in fact, all paradox is impossible. The Everett Wheeler-Graham, or multi-world theory, is correct. All possible quantum states, events, and possibilities and outcomes are really eventual and occurring. The chances of everything happening someplace at some time in the superverse is 100%. Just think, somewhere out there in a different dimension, you are super rich and you rule the world. Pretty nice for that other you. Although, by saying the many-world interpretation of quantum mechanics, whereby events from his timeline may differ from ours, Titor also expressed assurance that the differences were minimal. As such, his descriptions have been interpreted as predictions and compared with historical events since 2001. The most immediate of Titor's predictions was of an upcoming civil war in the United States having to do with order and rights. He described it as beginning in 2004 with civil unrest surrounding the presidential election of that year. Well, how about what's going on right now as a result of the presidential election? This civil conflict that he characterized as having a Waco-type event every month that steadily gets worse would be pretty much at everyone's doorstep, and it was supposed to erupt in the year 2008. Now look at the news right now. Doesn't it kind of look like a civil war is running rampant in some of the bigger cities? As a result of the war, the United States is supposed to split into 5 regions based on varying factors and different military objectives. This civil war, according to Titor, would end in 2015 with a brief but intense World War III. Well, California wants to secede from the Union right now. That would be one split. It's just too bad for them that the entire state is so deep in debt they couldn't afford to try starting their own country. Maybe Mexico would be willing to take them on. But Titor was vague as to the exact motivations and causes for the World War III. At one point, he characterized the hostilities as being led by border clashes and overpopulation. He also pointed to the contemporary conflict between the Arabs and the Israelis as a cause, or rather as a stepping stone that preceded World War III. Perhaps we dodged a bullet. Vladimir Putin said he was preparing for war. Now he's ready to negotiate with the United States again. We are going to take a brief pause here for a few commercials and station identification, so don't go away. We'll be right back with John Titor, the time traveler, after this. You're listening to Arkanasa Radio. Do you have skin? Would you like to take better care of it? Call Lourdes James, independent beauty consultant, and set up an appointment. Call 723-3019. If your vision isn't what it used to be, and you're not sure you're seeing Bigfoot or just your neighbor mowing his lawn, stop on by Del Norte Optical, 107 Calle del Norte. just across the street from the Embassy Suites. You should be able to see what you're looking at. Looking for a great cup of coffee? Swing on by the Organic Man Coffee Truck, 1002 Eaterby Day, suite number 7. Not a coffee drinker? They have hot chocolate, hot tea, and sometimes muffins and cookies. It's a great place to meet your friends for a conversation or curl up in the corner with a good book. The Organic Man Coffee Truck. Life is too short to drink bad coffee.
No, don't say goodbye. Stay with us. This is Arcanelza Radio. Quédate con nosotros. Estás escuchando Arcanelza Radio.
You're listening to Strange Things with Chris James. And welcome back to the show. As John Titor brought significant attention to himself and time travel, people began to try to track down his family and see if they could find out anything about his past. There didn't seem to be anyone named Titor living in Florida. The folks doing this search began to yell foul, seeing as they couldn't find the family. That was when somebody discovered that, lo and behold, John Titor was an assumed name. Who would have guessed that a guy coming from the future might not want anyone to know who his family really were, thus saving them what would have been unwanted notoriety and possible ruination of their lives. There would have been those who, you know the ones, would have tried to influence the family in an attempt to benefit for themselves. No, John Titor or Titor family is known to exist in or around Florida. There is also a lawyer who is representing the family that the last name we don't know. The lawyer has also been on Coast to Coast on numerous occasions. Titor claimed that one of his missions as a time traveler was to bring about a timeline where the devastating occurrences of the future never happened, thus saving at least some of the future races the death and destruction his timeline had gone through. He had sent this part of his mission to the Coast to Coast AM in 1998. He said he couldn't change his future, but he could change the future of others. A patent application US 20060073976 was filed for a method of gravity distortion and time displacement. The filing date is listed at October 1st, 2004 by a Marlon B. Pohlman of Tulsa, Oklahoma. The application includes the identical images posted by John Titor online, as well as the time travel theory he discussed. Titor described his time machine as several occasions. In an early post, he described it as a stationary mass temporal displacement unit powered by two top-spin dual positive singularities, producing a standard offset Tipler sinusoid. I couldn't even begin to put that into English. But back during World War II, Germany was working on a super secret weapon or device known as the Glock. The general in charge of this project, General Kemmler, vanished at the end of the war. General Kemmler had been in charge of designing and constructing the concentration camps all over Europe. He became the go-to guy when the head of the SS, Himmler, had a difficult mission. It wasn't until the end of the war that the Allies became aware of General Kemmler, due to the fact that the Nazis had burned all the records they could. A soldier going through some files found a telegram sent from Commanding General Himmler to General Kemmler demanding the return of his truck. Now, why would Himmler be so concerned with a truck, especially towards the end of the war? Germany had developed a giant airplane that could fly 4,000 miles non-stop. They had built just 2 of these monsters, and one was currently in the hands of General Kemmler. The other was out of service. It looks as if Himmler wanted this airplane as a means of escaping the Allies. The Allies began to dig a little deeper, and they discovered this General Kemmler was in charge of a secret base near the Czech border. When the military arrived at the secret installation, they found one of the most heavily guarded and well-defended places in all of Europe. There were anti-tank defenses, as well as anti-aircraft strewn about in 3 concentric circles. The closer to the inner ring they got, the more complex the defenses became. In the very center was an old quarry and an unused mine. Once they had breached all the abandoned defenses, the Allies found hundreds of scientists who had been executed as a way of keeping them from divulging any of their secrets to whichever army had arrived first. General Kemmler, as well as all his files, were gone. The mine had been destroyed, and it's still unexplored today. By piecing together files and reports, the investigator found out that Kemmler had been working on a project called Die Glock, or the Bell. The bell was a huge metal device. It stood 9 feet wide and 12 feet tall. The structure was powered by rotating mercury around in one direction while spinning a gyroscope in the other. The 2 rotations were supposed to cancel each other out and produce time-traveling machine. German submarine U-864 was detected and sunk on February 9, 1945 by the British submarine HMS Venturer. No one thought anything about this at the time, but March 2003, the Royal Norwegian Navy minesweeper K&M Tyr, alerted by local fishermen, found the wreck. An expedition to gather more details by sonar mapping of the seafloor was mounted. The wreck was in 2 major sections, fore and aft, with the center section missing, which included the conning tower. Further analysis was performed with a remotely operated underwater vehicle in August of 2005, locating an additional 107 pieces of the vessel scattered throughout the area, likely parts of the exploded center section, and they found mercury contained in 1,857 rusting steel bottles located down in the vessel's keel, which were leaking and posed a severe environmental threat from potential mercury poisoning. Now think about it. It's the end of the war. Time to make plans to get to South America. What are you going to pack for this long trip? Gold, silver, diamonds. Yeah, sure, makes sense. These would all make life much more comfortable while you bask in the sun and plan for the Fourth Reich. 1,857 bottles of mercury. Why? What could you do with mercury unless you plan to build another bell? And why build something like this if you don't have the plans to use it? December 9th, 1965, in Kecksburg, Pennsylvania, something that looked an awful lot like the Nazi bell came crashing down into the woods. We're going to have to leave that story for another show because that's several hours worth of information right there on its own. So did the Nazis have a machine capable of traveling through time? If so, where did they get the idea? The Ahnenerbe was an institute in Nazi Germany proposed to research the archaeological and cultural history of the Aryan race. They were founded in July 1st, 1935 by, who else, Heinrich Himmler. The Ahnenerbe later conducted experiments and launched expeditions in an attempt to prove the mythological Nordic population had once ruled the world. The name Ahnenerbe means inheritance from the ancestors. Originally, the official mission of the Ahnenerbe was to find new evidence of the racial heritage of the Germanic people. However, due to Himmler's obsession with occultism, it quickly became his own occult tool. The group was formerly called the Study Society for Primordial Intellectual History, German Ancestral Heritage, but it was renamed in 1937 as the Research and Teaching Community of the Ancestral Heritage. Shorter and easier to say. Not only did they search the globe for their so-called heritage, they also went to India, looking into reports of the Vimanas that were said to fly about ruling the skies and raining down death and destruction onto the planet. Vimanas were supposed to have been around about 5,000 years ago. So the Nazis got their idea for the bell from Vimanas from ancient India. Were the Nazis trying to control time as well as ruling the entire world? Well, here are a few stories of unintentional time travel. People who found themselves in other times quite thoroughly by accident. October 1969, a man identified only as L.C. and his business associate, Charlie, were driving south from Abbeville, Louisiana, towards Lafayette on Highway 167. As they were driving along the mostly empty road, they began to overtake what appeared to be an antique car, traveling very slowly. The two men were impressed by the mint condition of the nearly 30-year-old car. It looked showroom new, and they were puzzled by its bright orange license plate on which was stamped only 1940. They figured the car had been part of some antique auto show. As they passed the slow-moving vehicle, they slowed their car down so they could get a better look at this old model vehicle. The driver of the old car was a young woman. She was dressed in vintage 1940s clothing, and her passenger was a small child who was likewise dressed. The woman appeared to be panicked and confused. L.C. asked if she needed help, and through her rolled-up window she indicated that, yes, she very much needed some help. L.C. motioned for her to pull off the side of the road. The businessmen pulled ahead of the old car and turned onto the shoulder of the road. When they got out, the old car had vanished without a trace. There were no turnoffs or anywhere else the vehicle could have gone. Moments later, another car pulled up to the businessmen, and quite puzzled, the driver said he had seen their car pull off to the side, and then he saw the old car simply vanish into thin air. Sometime in the 1940s, some woman had taken her child for a drive, only to find they had driven into 1969. Hopefully she took a moment to write down her experience, and someday someone in her family will find her diary and hopefully bring it to light. Two British couples vacationing in the north of France in 1979 were looking for a place to stay for the night. Along the way, they were struck by some signs that seemed to be very old-fashioned type of a circus. They asked some men standing by the road if there was some place where they could spend the night. The men said that, yes, there was a hotel just farther on down the road. They did find an old-fashioned building marked hotel. Inside this, they discovered everything antiqued, but it looked new and in well condition. There seemed to be no evidence of such modern convenience as telephones. The room had no lock, but simply a wooden latch, and the window had wooden shutters, but there was no glass in the windows. In the morning, as they ate breakfast, 2 gendarmes, which are the French police, entered wearing old-fashioned caped uniforms. After getting directions to Avignon from the gendarme, the couple paid their bill, which came to 19 francs, and they left. After 2 weeks in Spain, the couple made a return trip through France, and they decided they're going to stay at that old hotel again because, well, the price was right, and it was very quaint and rustic. This time, however, the hotel could not be found. They're certain they were in the exact same spot because they saw the exact same circus posters. They realized the old hotel had completely vanished without a trace. All the photos that they had taken while in the hotel, none of them would develop. With a little research, they did discover that the French gendarmes were wearing uniforms they had only used prior to 1905. I wonder what happened when the innkeeper took his francs to the bank, only to discover they were from the wrong year. We will be right back after these brief messages, so don't go away. You're listening to Arkanasa Radio. Do you have skin? Would you like to take better care of it? Call Lourdes James, independent beauty consultant, and set up an appointment. Call 723-3019. If your vision isn't what it used to be, and you're not sure you're seeing Bigfoot or just your neighbor mowing his lawn, stop on by Del Norte Optical, 107 Calle del Norte, just across the street from the Embassy Suites. You should be able to see what you're looking at. Looking for a great cup of coffee? Swing on by the Organic Man Coffee Truck, 1002 Iturbide, Suite number 7. Not a coffee drinker? They have hot chocolate, hot tea, and sometimes muffins and cookies. It's a great place to meet your friends for a conversation or curl up in the corner with a good book. The Organic Man Coffee Truck. Life is too short to drink bad coffee.
No, don't say goodbye. Stay with us. This is Arkanasa Radio. Quédate con nosotros. Estás escuchando Arkanasa Radio.
You're listening to Strange Things with Chris James. And welcome back. Don't forget, Christmas is coming. There are always those people that you just don't know what to buy them, or you just don't feel like going to the store and running all over town. And check out some of my writings at Amazon.com. Such classics as Flying Saucers Attack Walmart or The BAG Company. Check me out at Amazon.com. Just type in Chris James, This Sucks, to find a link to all of my books. There are some places that just seem to come up in time slips more often than others. Bold Street in Liverpool, England, is one such place. 2006. A thief was running from a security guard in the Bold Street area when he looked behind him and saw that the security guard was no longer on his tail. Relief turned to bewilderment. He saw the cars were of an old style and people were dressed differently. He looked at a newspaper and found the date to be 1967. He hurried up Ranelagh Street and found himself, thankfully, back in 2006, though he could still see into the past by looking down the street. The man was promptly arrested. Upon further investigation, the Echo, a local newspaper, found that the details the thief gave were correct regarding where various shops and landmarks were located in 1967. The security guard also said the young man seemed to vanish as he was chasing him. Then there's the story of Mr. X, who used to work in Bold Street in Liverpool. About 10 years ago, he was walking down Renshaw Street when he turned by Rapid into the lane that takes you across the railway line and emerges from Borough Bar. Mr. X had worked in Liverpool for a while and knew the shops well. Noticing the ones that had closed down, such as Collinson's, leaving empty shoe stands and hat stands still in the window, Mr. X carried on walking. He was going to meet his wife in town that Saturday afternoon. But as he walked on Bold Street, he noticed that Collinson's appeared to have reopened, as the window was full of shoes and hats as it had been a while previously. He also noticed that catchpoles appeared to be on the other side of the street, where it had been some years before, prior to moving to the site across from it. He turned to go down Bold Street and noticed that all the cars appeared to be 10 or 15 years out of date, but all appeared new. He noticed the shoppers seemed to be wearing unusual clothes, not dramatically old, but fashions from 10 to 15 years ago. He assumed there was some event on in the city that weekend. The street also seemed unusually quiet. There were sounds, but they appeared somewhat muffled. Mr. X carried on, and he met his wife outside the bank on Hanover Street. They went in and attended to their business. Everything in the bank seemed normal, but when he emerged, Mr. X was surprised to notice that everything had returned to how it should have been. The empty shops were once again empty. Catchpoles was back to where it had been the previous week. Mr. X is unsure if the scene changed back to normal as he and his wife entered the bank or as they emerged, but seeing as the bank appeared normal, he assumed things changed back as he entered the bank. His wife, who had not been on Bold Street, had not noticed anything different that day. In March 2006, a man was arrested for insider trading. He had started with $800, which he had turned into $350 million. This was quite an accomplishment and considered impossible without some kind of insider knowledge. This is what most stock traders go to jail for. He told authorities that he had come back 200 years from the future. Of course, the police figured the man was lying, but no matter what they tried, they couldn't unravel his story. The police were going to keep him locked up until he told them his real name and where he was from. They also wanted the name of his co-conspirators, those people that had been feeding him the illegal information. The man was locked in the local jail and kept under strict conditions. They wanted to know who he talked to and when. He is monitored to gain any information as to who he was in contact with. While awaiting his arraignment, he vanished from his cell. No one could figure out how. One minute he was locked in his cell, and the next it was empty. When someone escapes from jail, it brings in the big guns, people who know how to find people who don't want to be found. The man had simply vanished from the face of the earth. In a panic, wanting to fix the problem, his records vanished. The only records left are the news clippings that had been stashed away during the investigation. His name was Andrew Carlson. If you want to give him a search on the internet, just have a look. It's Carlssin. The story gives me the impression that in the future, equipment used for time travel isn't kept as secret as it is today. Somehow this guy Carlson got his hands on a time machine and came back in a bid to make a future in the stock market, and then he was spirited away. I thought it just wouldn't be a good time travel show without talking about the best well-known time traveler as far as TV goes. Doctor Who is a British science fiction television program produced by the BBC since 1963. The program depicts the adventures of the Doctor, a Time Lord, a spacefaring and time-traveling humanoid alien. He explores the universe in his TARDIS, a sentient time-traveling spaceship. Its exterior appears as a blue British police box, which was a common sight in Britain in 1963, when the series first aired. Accompanied by companions, the Doctor combats a variety of foes while working to save civilization and help people in need. Now, when the show was made, it was a filler. The BBC had a 30-minute time slot needing filling, so a bunch of writers got together and they hammered out a quick script. The actors were chosen more for their availability than their abilities. I'm not saying they were bad actors, they just weren't busy when they were asked. There was a very limited budget as well, so a lot of the wardrobe came from home. If you watch the earlier shows, you'll notice they keep the same outfits throughout most of the series. Props were scrounged from wherever they could be borrowed and used for many unrelated devices. The production company didn't think the show was ever going to be much of a catch-on, so as each episode was broadcast, the film was reused in order to put together the next show. After the Doctor Who program had become a hit, the BBC decided to rebroadcast the original episodes, only to discover they were missing the first dozen or so. Oh, what to do? They couldn't very well go and refilm them. Lo and behold, the Australian Broadcasting Company had recorded the first shows, and they allowed the BBC to reacquire the missing several episodes. The character of the Doctor was initially shrouded in mystery. All that was known about him in the program's early days was he was an eccentric alien traveler of great intellect who battled injustice while exploring time and space in an unreliable time machine, which looked suspiciously like a police phone booth. The initial character, the Doctor, mellowed out some as time went on. It was eventually revealed that he had been on the run from his own people, the Time Lords of the planet Gallifrey. William Hartnell was the first actor to portray the Doctor, but he was not in good shape. His health was declining as the show was becoming more popular. The other members of the cast had to pick up on any lines the good Doctor forgot or missed. Great. Now the BBC has a hit TV show that looks as if it won't last until the end of the year. Simple, some writer said. We'll just regenerate the Doctor and get somebody else to play his part. Patrick George Thoroton was hired and took over as the Doctor in 1966 to 69. Thoroton was a decorated service member from World War II. He enjoyed playing the Doctor, but after 3 years he was ready to try something else. So they got a guy named John Pertwee, who was the next actor to play Doctor Who. Of all the Doctors, he is sometimes referred to as being Tom Baker's dad. Now, Tom Baker was the Doctor, as far as a lot of folks are concerned. Baker had a flair that some of us came to believe was the real way a time-traveling Time Lord should behave. Surprisingly, at the age of 15, Baker had begun studying to become a monk. However, he lost his vocation at about the age of 21, so he left the monastic life and joined the military as a Royal Army Medical Corpsman. On leaving the Army, he joined the Merchant Navy, and then he became an actor. Tom Baker played the Doctor for so long that most people, when you ask them about Doctor Who, they'll simply refer to Tom Baker as being the Doctor. That's it for our show tonight. We have come to the end of the hour. Those of you who have never heard of Tom Baker or a Doctor Who, I suggest you look him up. Some of the shows are well worth watching. Next Saturday, we'll be talking with Brian MP, a Bigfoot investigator, so tune in to find out about his adventures. Until next Saturday, this is Chris James saying, I hope you've enjoyed our program.
Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man, the same murder 3? Strange things that happen here, no stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree.